Greenland.
Oh, so it didn't give me the option. I'm trying to figure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it didn't give me the option to present a window because I'm in Safari.
Oh.
All right, let me present.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, present? Sorry. Next time I'll log in with Chrome. I think Chrome is more friendly with Google Meets.
Yes. Google only tests things on Chrome, you know that.
Right.
That's not true, by the way. That was being silly. Let's see. This is the TOC. And presenting a tab actually works again, which is fantastic. Like you can switch tabs.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really good.
That's nice. Yeah.
Okay. Lynn, you can still run the meeting. You just tell me what you want me to present.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. Hopefully my technical difficulty can be solved next time. All right, so let's see. Meetings recorded. Thank you. Release manager nomination, if I can pronounce. Sam is nominated. We need 2 more. Do we have anybody?
We are already 1 week in the release, Lynn, so we really need release managers.
I think last time Kevin might said Red Hat maybe potentially.
Yeah, I started chasing that up. The only person who volunteered so far was Daniel, but his schedule is pretty full, so I need to chase that up and see if we can get somebody else to do that.
Okay,
Kevin,
great.
you're okay. Kevin, you're okay if we capture a TBD Red Hat?
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, I'll put that in the notes. Thank you, Kevin.
I can get that, Lynn.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so roadmap presentations. I guess, Shweta, we have one for test and release.
Lynn, sorry, before we move ahead, it says we need 2 more. So are we going to be okay? I mean, I guess we're stuck with just 2 release managers for 110. Is that what's going to happen?
I think we still want to try to find one more.
Yeah, that's sure. So I mean, I'm guessing IBM can't find any other person. Is there anyone from FedTrade?
If Red Hat is volunteering.
Yes, sorry, I keep forgetting Red Hat and IBM. Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. I guess if somebody else is interested, do sign up, even if you want to be a shadow and not a full release manager.
Yeah, it would be good to get one shadow for this. That's a good idea.
Okay, that's moving on then. So should I look at the proposed agenda before we get to the roadmap? Actually, is the roadmap, Shweta, the test and release yearly?
Yeah, so we are supposed to review the test and release yearly roadmap as well as 110 together with the user experience 110 release roadmaps.
Okay, so should we click on the link of the 2021?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Eric or Brian?
Yeah, we're both here.
Yeah, can you guys go ahead?
Yeah, so just scroll down there. So yeah, in terms of things that we want to do for 2021,
sorry,
I think I have them. Basically, the one thing we wanted to pick up is we wanted to pick up the Istio.io test automation. I think now that the documentation work group has sort of had a change in process, I don't think they're doing that anymore. So I think that's going to fall back to the test and release work group. I don't know that there's anything necessarily concrete in terms of work, but we do want to make sure that we do what we can to make sure that we continue the test automation effort that had started. The promotion of features process, we just want to keep making sure that we keep feature promotion on track.
Hey,
Don't let things.
On Istio.io test automation, are you looking for any improvements, or is it just like running the business as usual, so it's not stopped?
The question will be, what things do well, I guess you have each work group sort of picking up 3 pages or whatever per release. The question will be, do we need some additional improvements within the test framework to support work that's being done? So today, the test automation framework is there, but the question will probably be, does it satisfy all the requirements that are needed to actually test all the pages?
Okay.
I know Miriam was doing some work for the current release to handle, what do I want to say, staging across pages, so that, we have the one example that is about 10 pages long. We want to be able to test each page, building. So there was some work done for that. I don't know what might come up in future requirements.
Okay. So maybe not here, Eric, let's take it offline, but there are certain pages where we were looking for needs consideration, where we need to understand if the framework can support it and does not, what it's needed. So that requires some efforts, just because there wasn't anybody, so we were not looking into it. So let's just discuss that offline.
Yep. Yeah, that's basically what this item is for.
Okay.
Interjecting here for a second. Line 42, make other platforms consumable for running. We do have a item on the, I think it's this one right here, is actually designed to target that, whether we want to support multiple platforms and that kind of thing in Istio tests.
Or long running, but yes.
Yeah.
Is this for like different other cloud platform? Oh, OpenShift?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on if the vendor is willing to step in to help write the test and provide the environment.
Yeah, in terms of vendor platforms, yes. But I think this also pertains to, as Brian was saying, there might be some other things that we want to pick up as well. But
yeah.
So continuing on, I guess, Mac M1 support for Istio Cuddle was one of the things we want to do. And actually, I believe that's in and being built now into the daily commits. We want to handle, one of the things that we run into is part of our release building is the build stop if we detect that the base images have a CVE, and then we need somebody to go and build us new base images, run some scripts, and today that has to be somebody from Google to do it manually because they're the only ones with the creds. So we want to make sure that we automate that, so that when that happens, there's some automation that'll go and actually do all that all for us. We don't need to be blocked while we're trying to find somebody that can build these images. Annotations, maturity levels. Anything specific on that one, Brian?
Nope.
Okay.
That's your internal annotation, not exposed to the user, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Right. So we're not going to expose annotation maturity levels to users. Why not?
So this is discussing the effort that's going on to work on actually creating the levels for annotation. I think it will be surfaced through like Istio Cuddle and that sort of thing. But
our roadmap has an analyzer for it in 110.
Yeah.
Don't we already document annotations? Like we have an annotations page now, right?
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
approve
So-
Nathan's PR on that.
It's reasonable to include the maturity levels on that, right?
Yeah, I was asked to come up with requirements for annotations of various levels, whether they're beta, stable, etc. Kind of continuing on with the work that I did with feature levels, and that's kind of what this is encompassing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was confused when we said that wouldn't be public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nathan, do the docs include the status yet?
I'm sorry, guys. I'm just tuning back in. Can you repeat the question?
The doc page for annotations indicating the features level status.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's already there. Okay.
All right, so the next item, which we don't have anybody tasked to do, but we've had this discussion now for the last, I think we brought it up last summer, and we were going to do it last fall, and we decided to delay it a little bit. But the renaming of branches from master domain is something that we want to try to get done at some point this year. Evaluation of features. Basically, I think we just need to go through and make sure that we have everything identified correctly there.
I don't think we can have owner be Istio for that, by the way.
Okay, so going back here, there was a request for the definition of done to evaluate all of the features that we currently have in Istio to make sure that they meet the requirements for beta, etc. And if not, then have that as a debt in the Istio project. So this really encompasses that, and we listed that as test and release, but really I think that's a responsibility of all the work groups to say, hey, here's the features that we have, here's whether they meet the levels or not.
So there needs to be someone who is the owner of that, as in they are ultimately responsible for making sure that happens, even though the way they do it is by delegating to a bunch of other people. Like
Okay.
if you leave this as owner Istio, it won't happen.
Okay.
So we need to pick someone, or someone needs to take this and say, yes, okay, I will, track everyone down.
They will shepherd the.
Yeah, I would mark the line item as being a shepherd for this, and then find the assignee.
We need a
quick question here. Sorry, Sven, did you finish?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I totally see the value of assessing what features we have and whether the maturity level actually meets the bar that we have set now and look retroactively. I'm trying to understand how do we communicate this to the users and what action do they take? Like suppose there's a feature X and it's currently beta, and you determine that based on all our evaluation, it's supposed to be experimental or alpha.
So this is not.
Yeah, continue, Sven.
This is not meant for users, right? This is meant for us to identify where we have those gaps, and then it's up to us, I think, in TOC to help fill those, right? So find an owner for that feature if there isn't one already, and have them, go through the process to get it at least to where it's been described as, right? So if it was listed as beta and it really should be experimental, they need to go through the alpha and beta checklists. We'll leave it as beta externally because we don't have a choice, but it should be a high priority for us to fill those gaps. At least that's my goal.
Yeah, would it make sense to delegate based on the function to the work group? I mean, the work group leads to be able to come up quickly. And I agree with Savan. So we're not changing anything for the users. It's really for us to understand the gaps and how to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll maybe talk with Brian offline, because I understand there will be gaps identified. I'm guessing those gaps, because there are gaps, that means users must be seeing some effects of it now, right? And that's why we need to do some work. So I would like to outline those gaps earlier while the work is going on, and that's where the communication should happen.
Or maybe
Otherwise, why
not,
we?
yeah, maybe not even happen the communication if we can fill in the gap fast enough. I mean,
Sure.
it really depends on how big the gap is, right?
Sure.
So Neeraj, are you just pointing out that we need to do this earlier rather than later, or?
Yeah, but I'm trying to say that if the filling in the gaps, or if the maturity level has been assessed, we should warn the users and say, we are not meeting our bar, even though we have done this, and be upfront with it so they can actually take an action and decide whether they want to use that functionality or not. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Do you think we can maybe decide that when we get there?
Absolutely. We don't have to do that now. I was just trying to tease out what is the thought process here. What are we going to do?
Yeah, because I think my preference is maybe not to do that, but it depends on exactly what we find, right? So
Absolutely.
make a determination. Okay. But I think to your point, we should do this sooner rather than later. So maybe should it be higher priority than P1, and should we work to find someone as soon as we can? Or do you think it's fine as P1?
Yeah, I mean, if we can find an owner, I guess it's a chicken and egg, but yeah, I would make it P0 if we know that there are things lurking that don't meet our expectations.
Everyone okay with that? Making it P0?
Yep, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Shweta can help us track this too.
Sure, I can then.
All right.
All right, let's keep going. Yeah.
And we'll touch back to this, I guess, when we get to the 1.10 roadmap, maybe. So the next item is release visibility, and this is basically the work related to helping the release managers with the dashboard and making sure that things are on schedule and up to date, so that we can, better identify problems earlier. The next two are sort of related. One is evaluating the reevaluate policy bot and how it works, as well as some of the eng.istio.io work. I don't have anything specific there, but we want to make sure we do that. We have some automation that we want to do. So as I mentioned, the automation with the
sorry, real quick, can we go back to eng.istio.io?
Yep.
Do we have a sense of how useful that is? I mean, I guess that's kind of part of the reevaluate, but like, has there been a discussion with the maintainers of the project on what things they find useful, what they don't, what they'd like to use? Do they use this at all, right? Like, how much of an understanding do we have of the usefulness of that site?
And what, maybe what pieces, test flakes, other things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reevaluate and come up with a plan.
Okay.
It's definitely a mixed bag in terms of usefulness. However, the parts that are the most looked at tend to be the parts that require the most maintenance, which I guess is a good thing. Ideally, they wouldn't require that much maintenance either. But the areas we're investing work are areas like test flakes, where we do see that people seem to be using the dashboard.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would encourage you to do like if you don't have a comprehensive view of how useful it is, do a survey of the maintainers and see what people like and what they don't and what they want improved.
Sounds good.
So similar to the automation around the base images, we want to try to handle some other automation that we do for images. Like, I know the book info images, we get PRs that talk about, updating some of the sample code, and then they need to be rebuilt and repushed to Docker and tested. And that sort of is a longer process that involves somebody who can build the images and push them to Docker, as well as the PR originator making sure that they test the various things. So we'd like to do some automation in that space as well to try to limit the time it takes a developer to do the building and pushing, as well as shortening the window that the PRs are out there. One of the things we had done earlier, and I don't know how much of this is done at the moment, but we want to make sure that we automate and document the long running tests. I think it's mostly done, but the problem we have today is that there's only one, maybe two people that sort of always do all the long running tests. So whenever we want to spin a new release, it's, go talk to somebody and have that done. I think we want to make sure that we can get that better documented to let more people be able to do it. I mean, part of the problem we have today too is it's run on GKE, so that limits the number of people who can actually kick it off, I think. But if we set it up as some jobs, we might be better off with that. Next one, potentially update the Ubuntu image. We need to do some more looking at that to see when end of support of the current image is, but we want to make sure we're staying ahead of the curve there as well. And then the last one is one we sort of talked about already, making sure that other platforms are consumable while we're running either Istio.io tests or the long running tests or things like that to handle verification. So potentially in the terms of the verification, like the long running tests, other vendors could potentially run the tests to do their own verification. So that's sort of the 2021 roadmap as a whole. In terms of sort of documenting what we were going to do for 1.10, if you look at the right-hand side of the share, you can sort of see what's under the Q2 column. You can see where we have P0, P. Yep, right there, the Q2 column. So that's sort of what we were planning on doing in terms of 1.10. Since we don't really have anything that has feature stages associated with it, we just sort of hijacked this column to sort of document when we wanted to do different things. So for 1.10, we want to work on the promotion of features to continue with that. Like I said, the Mac M1 support, I think, is pretty much done. We want to make sure we handle the base image stuff because that results in some security issues. We might want to, after our discussion, move the evaluation of features into that. We'll have to talk about that and see if we can find somebody who wants to shepherd that work for 1.10. And then P1 and P2 would be the book info automation or other image automation, as well as the Ubuntu stuff.
Yeah, I think the priority makes sense to me. I mean, honestly, everything user-facing is high priority, which you had on P0. The other ones, I think, are lower, depends on the staffing and interest. So I don't have any questions. Does anyone else have any?
I was just going to say the thing you already said, evaluate.
Oh,
Here, so.
Me too.
Let's definitely find someone to do that evaluation. Let's not delay that one.
All right. It is on the agenda for the next TNR workgroup meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah,
right.
excellent.
Thanks,
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep. Thanks, folks.
Oh, we're supposed to do
Yeah,
user
what's
experience
that?
1.10 roadmap review. Is there a doc for that?
Mitch or Ed, which one are you planning to use?
Sorry, the spreadsheet should have all of our 110 roadmap.
Okay.
That same spreadsheet?
Not the yearly one. Here, let me, I've got the link. Let me drop it in. There it is. All right. Ed, I don't know if you saw my ping offline. I'll go ahead and I'll talk about the analyzer stuff if you want to talk about the rest. All right, great. So the first step, we have some analyzers that analyze the maturity of various APIs, annotations. We would like to, oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. In row 2, we're talking about getting analysis data put into custom resource status. So this is something that we attempted in 1.9. We hit some performance challenges just as we went to move it into beta. We would like to solve those problems in the 1.10 timeframe and get this pushed out to beta and enabled by default for users. Basically, if you make a mistake configuring Istio, you should see a little message in the status field indicating your probable mistake. And Jason Wang and myself are working on that.
The proxy status item is merely to move what we have into a subcommand. As we have more people running external control planes, we found that people were confused about what permissions they had, and we wanted to make it more obvious that this command may not be available depending on how the security had been locked down. This also means rewriting the help text and things that come with Istio Cuddle.
And also, we're working on other ways to solve the, I mean, at least on environments, to solve the problem of, external control planes exposing this information in a better way.
Rows 6 and 7 are going to be about that, Carsten.
Okay.
Row 4 is what I originally started talking about. All of Brian and Nate's work on making sure that all of our annotations and APIs are marked with a maturity level. We would like to present that to users. An analyzer seems like the right vehicle to do that. There's a little bit of implementation challenge there in terms of whether the user cares to make sure it's alpha or higher or beta or higher, etc. But bottom line is we would like a surface in Istio control that lets users know the maturity level of features they've used. Sort of a stretch goal along those lines that may or may not make it into 1.10 is also a way to block using features so that you could set like a control plane level flag that says, don't allow me to use alpha features.
Yeah, I wonder if you start it as kind of like a dry run version of that, right? Where it's the initial version just controls whether the analyzers are putting errors for alpha, and later we can try to block. Because I don't think we'd want to roll out blocking immediately anyway. Right?
Most of this code was in 1.9 release candidate and was pulled at the last minute because it was also checking the annotations that we ourselves were applying in the injector. So it's going to be cleared up to allow list the things that we ourselves are putting in.
Yeah, I think that'll be really, really useful being able to report that to users. That sounds good. Okay.
So the quick question here, I agree this is going to be very useful. Does this cover like the field level status for experimental and deprecated, or just the overall, like Istio operator, using that as an example, right? Istio operator, I think it's alpha today, like certain fields within Istio operator may be experimental. Would the user be able to kind of differentiate those?
We didn't put that on the roadmap because we weren't sure if that information was going to be available to us. So Jason has a proposal to put into Istio API sort of which fields are experimental, but and alpha, and we don't have that yet in a way we can access.
I see.
It's in the plan. It just lacks staffing at this point.
Got you. So for 1.10, what you are looking at, maybe it's like at a higher level of Istio operator, EnvoyFilter, or the network resources, whether they are on each feature status and present that to the user, but not look at individual fields.
For 1.10, we want to use the information that Istio API provides for annotations and for custom resources themselves. In the past, we have had ad hoc code written for individual fields, and that has always broken. If any other working group tells us that a particular field is being deprecated or is not recommended, we will write an we have an existing ad hoc analyzer for that. We'll manually do it, but it's often incorrect and it has been wrong before.
So Ed, it means this is orthogonal to the feature status page. This is at an API level, if I'm understanding correctly.
So the idea is that we are using APIs to enable features, right?
Sure.
And so we want to give the user, the long-term view is this ought to be a comprehensive understanding of what various maturity levels you are engaging with in your Istio installation, whether we're talking APIs, features, annotations, etc.
So Mitch, from an automation perspective, obviously, Jason was working on the proposal to annotate the API resources themselves to indicate feature maturity status for the API resource. Is the intent to provide some kind of linking from that to a kind of catalog of feature status items?
I'm not sure that I would describe it as a linkage. However, the intent is to take that once it's done, which again, it's not slated for 110 at this point, and to expose it to the user. So the idea is you may be using a particular value in an API that is deprecated to turn on a feature that is still beta.
Right.
In which case, we want to be able to communicate to you, hey, this feature is good, but you probably want to enable it this other way, right?
Right. Yeah, so because we don't yet have a kind of, well, we've been working on a feature catalog that could be used as part of tooling and automation, but we haven't yet assessed its coverage for kind of creating that correlated feedback for users other than in an ad hoc way, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, and it's not a 110 question, but getting that so it's not so ad hoc, is that valuable, and assessing the value of doing that work, I suppose?
I do think it's valuable. I think what you're seeing here in the roadmap is our intent to iterate towards that goal.
Okay.
Not the sort of thing we'll be able to accomplish in one release. We'd like to make a meaningful improvement this release and then be able to reevaluate where to go next.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, all makes sense. And I think this is why, the yearly roadmap could become beneficial because you're presenting like quarterly basis too.
Yes. And frankly, that particular item could move forward much faster if we had staffing for it. It's just a matter of man hours, I think.
Yeah, makes sense.
Row 5 is sort of a generic, more analyzers. As we add more features to Istio, there are more and more ways that we can give helpful information to the users. And of course, with analyzers being written to status fields, that help becomes much more proactive and visible to those users. So we see sort of an exponential growth in the value of investing in analyzers for our users, and we'd like to continue that.
A quick question here, Mitch. So are currently analyzers mostly being written ad hoc after the fact by the UX working group, or is there more tight integration when the features are introduced? The authors of those features or the APIs are themselves writing analyzers?
I would say the former, in my experience, ad hoc.
Okay.
UX is happy to help anyone who wants to write an analyzer with any kind of mentoring.
So I guess one question is, if we were to do a user study and ask them what would be the most useful analyzer that we don't yet have, or to get a list, is that the right way to go about starting to drive some of that in a more principled manner?
That is not a bad idea. I would worry about the cohesiveness of that list and the feasibility of the list. Generally, we approach it as if there's a problem we've run into in configuring our service mesh that analyzers didn't help with, that's a good time to write an analyzer. It's a bit like a regression test for a bug.
Row 5 is linked to a GitHub issue that lists all the analyzers people have asked for. And generally, if we have time, we go for the ones with the most thumbs up at GitHub.
That's certainly a survey.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's lean towards that if we can. And we can definitely do what Louis is saying, but already we have a lots of GitHub issues.
Yeah,
where
like
people,
I'm sure we have a more than meaningful backlog. I was just wondering if it was a way to kind of engage with the future development process. So maybe working group leads, go take a look at the list and see if any of that resonates with you.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask a related question, which is, are you planning any work around upgrades and analyzers? So like an upgrade analyzer that I can install before installing 110 or 111 that'll tell me if I have problems, or how do we manage those expectations?
I think our primary investment in upgrades is around the feature maturity or API maturity, allowing users to sort of assess their own risk, particularly when it comes to deprecated features and fields. That should be run before an upgrade to understand likely areas of breakages.
Yeah, but so like what I was thinking is if you're running it with the 1.9 code base before upgrading to 110, you don't have as much knowledge as if you're running with the 110 code base. So do we already do something like that? Do we have an upgrade test? Like, yeah, exactly. Can I upgrade?
We don't have that. We had wanted that for 1.9, and that is the motivation for making the maturity level analyzers.
Because at least in theory, if we're talking about beta features and higher, if they were not deprecated in 1.9, they can't be removed in 110, right?
Right. No, I just, yeah, as a stopgap, I'm wondering if we could do something simpler, just like a pre-upgrade analyzer.
It's a bit more complicated than just the beta status. I mean, if you are in a cluster and you applied mesh config, you have an installed version 1.7, you apply mesh config and set some settings, like set a different CA or all kind of other things. It's not trivial. It's not sufficient to have the same beta level. It's a new control plane needs to be compatible in settings to have the same CA. So it's a very risky thing to claim that it's compatible without deeper understanding. The only way is actually to try to see if it works, in my opinion.
So maybe something for the yearly roadmap around upgrade compatibility testing or something.
Right. I mean, we had discussed this before, right? Asking about the pre-upgrade check.
Yeah.
I don't know if we consider that strictly part of the UX working group or part of the upgrade effort.
It's definitely something we've been thinking about, but most of our thought has been around the lines of this maturity functionality. If there's something that would not be covered by maturity, like known incompatibilities that we didn't take time to deprecate, then that would need separate work.
It's not incompatibility, it's configuration compatibility. I mean, the new control plane needs to be compatible, and I'm not aware of any feasible solution to do that except deploying a prober verifies that it works, and so without active actions, basically. So what upgrade can do.
So I think there's a difference here between perfect and better than nothing, right? So
we do want to solve this in an ad hoc way. So if we find people who, with release candidates, are having trouble, we would definitely want to add that in so that we could detect things that we knew would fail when we tried the probe.
Yeah, I'm just trying to move us away from people read the upgrade notes and understand them to
agreed
guide upgrade process. So yeah, anyway, we can discuss that separately and in the upgrade working group and sort of co-own that with UX anyway. Okay. All right, keep going. Thanks.
So row 6 is about proxy status and version, which have caused trouble both with people running external control plane and with various options that keep the control plane firewalled away. Row 6 is just about using information that we may already have but not be using to find the control plane, like looking at the injector or better timeouts to see if the existing debug ports are blocked. Row 7 is about adding something to Pilot Agent so that you could exec onto a sidecar and then have the sidecar ask the control plane about proxy status, which may be needed. We've only made that P2 because we failed at that for the last 2 releases and don't want to fail at anything higher than a P2.
Ed, sorry, this is a little bit too deep down in terms of implementation. Why will a user care for this? Can you tell me again?
So the version command has always used debug information from Istio-D on a specific port, and that information is just not available in external control plane or maybe locked away. The proxy status has the problem, if you're using an external control plane, that it might be hard to contact the particular Istio-D instance that knows the status for a particular pod. So the only solutions that we currently have are based on implementation trickery. There's no previous releases. We've wanted to make a well-defined service in Istio-D that knows about all the pods that could be used for these things. That work has proven to be too difficult for any one person to do. So we're trying to, that's why we're moving the status command off the main line, because it may not be available to everyone. And then that's why we're trying to, if it is available, make it work, even if it's harder to work.
Got it. So this is basically making this command work across different deployment strategies, like external Istio-D and stuff like that.
The really tricky thing about this was, we did a performance improvement and we stopped using kubectl exec and went to proxy status, or we went to proxy proxy forward, port forward for performance reasons a few releases ago. 99% of our users thought that was great and it was faster for them. 1% didn't, but we had no way to test that didn't work for them because their ports were blocked, because our sort of testing assumes that you can talk to a particular 15, 14 port on your control plane. That testing has proven to be a real bugaboo about these things.
One comment on this subject is not only for external Istio-Ds. We have a feature in pilot, which is disables the debug endpoint, which with a command recommended for production use, because without that option in production, you'll have debug available to everyone wide open on a plain HTTP with no authentication. So there is this option that was added, and obviously production users are expected to set it. And if they do, most of this stuff stop working because it's using the debug on HTTP without authentication.
And Costin, if they do set that, currently in Istio we have two proxy statuses, the regular and the one in experimental. The one in experimental still will work, but it's not considered a fallback strategy for the mainline one. And that's part of row 5, is if the debug port it won't work, try the experimental version, which might work.
Yeah, I think in all cases, the experimental version is the ones that will work guaranteed, because it's based on the XDS port, which is required anyway.
Right.
Anything else is very likely to fail in production.
The experimental version works better for networking, but the problem is that it's hard to look up where the XDS endpoint is. So what we're hoping to do in 110 is to scrape the injector to find that out.
No, I understood. Just want to make sure that people understand that production is likely to be locked and all these things will not work except the experimental. And on testing is obviously much easier to test with the things that is,
Yeah, the bottom line is that the functionality that we've provided historically in proxy status requires a very high level of privilege that we don't expect most users to have. Maybe control plane operators will have that moving forward. But our application operators, our mesh operators, et cetera, will not have that access. And so this experimental version that we would like to begin investing in more will not have the full functionality that proxy status brought. We will be implementing whatever bits of functionality are capable of carrying over without that privilege.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess one comment I would make is we actually ask around at IBM before I leave, how many people are using proxy status. I know it was very super useful, at the very early days of Istio when we have a lot of bugs. But I think these days, because the project is a lot better now, I honestly haven't used proxy status for a long time myself. I mean, the proxy config, I use it a lot, like the dashboard Envoy, but the proxy status I've been using very little now. Go ahead, Costin.
I just want to say, if someone was using proxy status, that's a sign that the production system is not locked down properly. And probably should do a better job advertising that in production, you should turn off plain HTTP and the endpoint is for debug only.
Right, that's the thing, right? So we don't expect people to use it in production.
But it should not be there in the first place.
I mean, to be fair, there are people who could lock it down in production while still keeping the port open using firewall rules or other mechanisms outside of our control. So I guess one suggestion I might have is that if really the differentiation between the kind of 2 degrees of proxy status is the level of privilege that the user has, can we make that distinction clear in the UX of what we want to provide, right? Where you have Istio proxy status and Istio, privileged proxy status, right? And we basically describe the difference between the 2 things, and so people understand.
Yep, that's the purpose of line item 3, Louis. The existing privileged command will be moved to a sub command that makes it clear that it is for control.
Yeah,
okay.
Good. And Lynn, I actually disagree. I think you're an expert user of Istio, and I think you are using the proxy config to begin with, but many people need to understand by looking at the status, which of these proxies might have issues, and then go into and debug it. So I still find it very useful, and I'm glad that we are making it less privileged. Like you can run it in less privileged environments.
Okay, that's great. I mean, if you guys find it useful. So that's great. I mean, if you guys find it useful, I totally get it. I just haven't find it reporting like unsynced these days, where it used to be like 2 years ago. It always reports some type of problem.
Well, like one workflow, Lynn, for that part of the command would be to check what data planes are still accessing an old revision of the control plane before shutting it down. If you're safely operating your control plane, you want to make sure everybody's migrated off before you turn it down. That would be one use where a control plane operator would be very interested in using proxy status as it exists today.
But metrics are a much better way to find the same information, which works across clusters, multi-cluster environments and a lot of other places. Because
do metrics show which proxies are connected to which revisions?
Show the revisions that are active in system, or they should show.
But it doesn't tell you how to fix it, right? You know somebody's using it.
I do think we should move on, and if there are more ways of debugging this, we should document it. And if someone knows, let's just document, make it official.
Yeah, sounds good. I think we have consensus with the privileged proxy status. Do you guys have anything else you want to cover in the roadmap?
You have the one last line item here, and that is that we'd like to continue the UX research that we started in the fall around upgrades. We want to get an idea of how much we've moved the needle in 1.9, how much better has the experience gotten, and particularly we want to provide feedback on that before we make decisions about end-of-lifing 1.8. So that we can make an educated decision based on our user experience.
Yeah, that sounds valuable.
So I've been soliciting many of you individually for questions to put on that survey. I've got a spreadsheet going where anybody can put suggestions, and I've shared that with the upgrade working group. Ping me or drop a note in the spreadsheet if you have a particular question about upgrade usability that you'd like answered in our user survey.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Mitch, and thank you, Ed.
Yeah, this is really nice. Thanks, folks. I look forward to seeing if we don't get 8 of them done, even the first few ones, because it will be really helpful for users.
All right, should we move on? What I saw on the agenda is Josh had proposal. I'm not sure if Josh is here because I didn't hear his voice.
Yeah, Josh is not here, but the proposal is basically to say you're not allowed to use EnvoyFilter for any feature that is beta or beyond, because EnvoyFilter is a It's a break glass, low level, and it itself is not beta plus.
Just to be clear, do we mean we don't allow or want a user to use EnvoyFilter to achieve a beta and alpha feature? Yes.
A beta
it's okay
feature.
to use it internally.
You shouldn't have a beta feature that documentation that create this EnvoyFilter this way.
Right.
Like, I forget what feature just came out with that. There was a feature.
Request classification is one of them, I think. So what's the guidance you want to put out for those which you have already promoted to beta?
We put request path classification to beta?
I thought so. No?
Really?
Let me check, but as far as I remember, I saw that PR flyby.
Okay, I haven't seen it. So internal is okay, like telemetry V2 it uses
I think so.
filter and WASM, they are okay, but not on any of our Istio.io document.
Well, no, so alpha features, it's okay, which can be documented.
Oh, right, for promotion to beta, yeah.
So
it's
Louis, I
promoted
just
to beta.
checked. Request classification is beta.
And it relies on people creating EnvoyFilter?
Absolutely.
Ouch.
And I think Doug was in the chat stating that a lot of telemetry stuff also requires EnvoyFilter.
Requires doesn't mean that it's something used internally, not something the users are supposed to use. There's a big difference.
Yeah, that was specifically, the purpose of my first question, right? We're only talking about things we make the user do to achieve a feature effect, not things that we do internally.
The user customizes telemetry settings by modifying the EnvoyFilter. If I understand.
I don't think that's supported officially. Or
it is. It is written down in the docs right now. That's the only way people can customize telemetry.
That's possible, but it contradicts the alpha feature status of EnvoyFilter. It cannot be. Something is wrong here.
I
understand.
That's why Josh was bringing this up. That's why we're talking about this.
Exactly.
Right, because we didn't have a strong coupling between API status and feature status, right?
Yeah.
But basically, what Josh is proposing is doing that for the EnvoyFilter. And we have cases where we have already exceeded that threshold.
Yeah.
But again, the question is, cannot require EnvoyFilter for the implementation or for the exposed to user surface?
No, we're just talking about the exposed to user surface.
Yeah, the first one is fine for everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And in the second case, sorry, Louis, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Neeraj.
I was just going to say the second case is interesting, right? So if you look at customizing telemetry labels or metric labels, for example, it has been a feature from the first release of Istio, right? So that has been a stable feature. When we moved to telemetry V2, we kind of took it away and then we reintroduced it. So the progression there is more murky than we like.
Yeah. But I guess one thing we should look at is EnvoyFilter the right API to expose that customization.
It's obviously not the right API, but it's the API we're pushed into using to make changes 4 releases ago.
Yeah, so if it's not, maybe it shouldn't be beta.
Well, that's too late. If it is beta, we can't unbeta it.
And also, it's a big regression, right? If we can't customize telemetry labels.
Can I ask a question? Are we really talking about people editing the EnvoyFilter directly, or about putting stuff in values.yaml? Because right now, every time you do install upgrade, we override EnvoyFilter with whatever is in values.yaml. So I would argue that the actual API is values.yaml or mesh config or whatever the stuff gets into the installer.
No, Costin, for the features, the 2 features I just mentioned, you will have to edit the EnvoyFilter directly.
But that's not safe because every time you do upgrade,
I know it's not. We all know that.
Okay.
We don't want to be in this situation, but we are, I think, is the only way to look at this.
Right.
I'm just trying to state the obvious here. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nobody's trying to rewrite history, right? Clearly, we have situations in this state. They need to be addressed. So I guess the question is, if we want to institute this policy, we should also institute, as quickly as possible, creating the APIs necessary to backfill for those cases where we have exceeded this boundary, if we want to enforce it.
We're going to make exceptions and make improvements, right? Yeah.
Okay, sorry, we are at the top of the hour. I have to jump off.
Okay. So I don't disagree with this proposal in principle. I think that's in general, I think it's the right thing to trend towards, but we should capture that there are exceptions that still need to be addressed, because it can't be a blanket policy right now. It could be for new things.
Yeah, I think we want to say this should be the policy going forward. I would actually expand it and say, as part of the beta checklist, like you can't have alpha level APIs required in documentation as part of going to beta.
How would you treat mesh config? So, and if you expand it like that?
Yeah, mesh config is. I don't think we should require mesh config as it is today, but we have no choice because that's the only option we have. So,
but Sven was right in the first place. I mean, beta API should not require on mesh config. I mean, if you have a beta feature, it should have its own beta API or its own proper API. Mesh config is a way for experimental and alpha to
No, Costin, that's not totally correct, right? Like mesh config is a way it is an API. It's perfectly reasonable for there to be beta level features in mesh config right now, because it is the global API, and we have things that make sense as globals. And it doesn't always make sense to go create a new CRD every time we have a new feature, right? So it's more nuanced than that. The fact that mesh config has a lot of other stuff in it that we want to get rid of or refactor, right, is a separate problem.
Yeah, I would like to have an hour dedicated to talking about mesh config, but.
But at least can we agree to separate what the config surface for the mesh administrator, the person who runs Istio versus the config surface for regular users who actually do stuff?
No,
because that's really the problem.
Costin, I totally agree with you for EnvoyFilter here. I think the statement that Sven was saying to broadening it, we need to think about it more as a principle, because there are cases like mesh config.
I'm fine starting with EnvoyFilter, then we could expand it to other
Exactly.
we have, right, and annotations. But yes, yeah, we need to be careful. We need to think about it. We should also take the time to go back and look at all the existing beta features that rely on alpha APIs and discuss them. Right, yeah, not today, this we're out of time.
All right, I got to drop to, well, see you all in IstioCon.
IstioCon next week, excited.
Woo! All right, bye.
So one quick question